The first shell did not sound like a shell at all. It sounded like a cathedral bell being punched by a god. Inside the German Tiger tank known only as 224, Unteroffizier Lucas Ehrenfeld felt the floor plates jump beneath his boots and waited for the white-hot storm of steel that should have torn through him. It never came. Instead, there was only a strange metallic shudder, a vibration that hummed through the hull like a living heartbeat. The loader stared at him with wide animal eyes, expecting death. When none arrived, both men slowly exhaled, not yet understanding that they were living inside a miracle born entirely of a mechanic's illegal act. 3 months earlier, before anyone had heard of the patch, before anyone had whispered about a tiger that refused to die, a thin young mechanic named Emil Brach stood behind a forward repair depot near Kharkov. He was only in his early 20s, though the war had already carved a decade into his face. He had been maintaining tigers for half a year, long enough to learn their strengths, and longer still to learn their deepest fear, the turret ring. Specifically, the thin seam of armor beneath it, a vulnerable joint the Soviet gunners were learning to exploit with deadly precision. He had seen crews returned in canvas shrouds because a single well-placed round curled under that ring and sliced the turret crew into silence. He told himself he would not let that happen again, not to any tank he was responsible for. But regulations were iron laws. No unauthorized welding, no improvised plates, no modifications to the sacred tiger armor without written approval from men hundreds of miles away. Rules, forged in peacetime workshops, did not care that men were dying today. Brach cared. And so one night after the officers had retired, he walked to the scrap pile behind the depot and extracted a curved steel fragment from a ruined Panzer III. It was thick, ugly, uneven, but it was stronger than the section of tiger armor that had already cost too many lives. He shaped the piece by hand, hammering it for hours beneath dim lantern light until his fingers bled, and the metal finally accepted the curve he demanded. Near dawn, he pressed the crescent into place under the turret, welding it as quietly as he could manage. When he finished, the new armor plate glowed like the heart of a small star. He stepped back and whispered a prayer that no officer would notice his crime. The crew of 224 did not know any of this. They only knew their new mechanic worked hard and kept to himself. Their commander, Oberfeldwebel Karl Reinhardt, was a veteran of too many battles, a man who believed not in luck but in the stubborn need to survive. His gunner, Otto Kästner, was steady and silent, a man who seemed carved from the same steel he targeted. Their loader, Jonas Himmel, was a farm boy with the strength of an ox and the quietness of an empty church at night. The driver, Friedrich Stoss, small and wiry, drove the Tiger as if it were an extension of his own bones. And the radio operator, Anton Mielke, talked endlessly to fill the terrifying silences of war. They were young, but they were good. None of them had asked for a miracle, but they were about to need one. It happened on a morning when snowflakes drifted down like ash. 2, 4, and 3 other Tigers rolled out to support infantry, falling back under sudden Soviet pressure. Visibility was barely a kilometer. The world was a ghostly vault of gray. Reinhardt expected scattered resistance. What waited for them instead was a wall of fire. A forest of anti-tank guns, artillery, and concealed armor so thick that even the veterans felt something cold in their stomachs. The first hit came so abruptly that the crew barely had time to register the sound. A Soviet 57mm round slammed directly into the Tiger's weak spot beneath the turret ring. The very place where so many Tigers had died screaming. Instead of a catastrophic breach, instead of the turret jamming or shrapnel scything through flesh, the illegal armor plate simply rang like struck iron. The turret kept turning. The crew kept breathing. A second hit followed. Then a third. Both struck the same hidden plate. Kästner fired back with the calmness of a surgeon. destroying a gun position ahead. But the Soviet line was thickening, like fog becoming stone. More guns emerged, more tanks. The Tiger lurched forward into a storm it should have never survived. The fourth hit came from the left. The fifth from the right. The sixth and seventh struck so quickly that the vibrations merged into one long metallic roar. Sweat rolled down the gunner's face, though the tank was freezing cold. Himmel screamed over the noise, asking how many hits they had taken. No one answered. No one could. They were too busy fighting to stay alive. By the ninth impact, the illegal patch glowed faintly, heat shimmering off its warped surface. By the 12th, the entire interior of the Tiger felt like it was shaking apart. On the 14th hit, Himmel shouted a prayer in the dark. On the 15th, Kästner muttered that no steel on earth should take this kind of punishment. On the 16th, the crew braced for the kill shot. Then the 17th hit struck. It was a direct hit from a Soviet ZS gun at brutal, breath-stealing range. The force should have split the turret ring like rotten timber. Instead, the improvised armor patch absorbed the blow, bending inward like a shield made by desperate hands, holding the Tiger together long enough for 224 to fire again, advance again, and bleed forward through the haze. When the battle finally died, when the smoke drifted away, and the world slowly quieted, 224 was the only German armored vehicle still functioning in that sector. Infantry who survived that hell said the Tiger looked like a creature dragged from the underworld. Its armor cratered and smoking, steam rising as if the beast itself were breathing. And yet, it still moved, still fought, still lived. Only after the fighting ended did the crew crawl from the hull to see what had saved them. The patch, warped and blackened, clung to the underside of the turret like the shell of some monstrous beetle. Reinhardt knelt to touch it, feeling the warmth of steel that had defied death. Brach stood nearby, heart pounding, expecting to be arrested on the spot for his forbidden act. Reinhardt turned, stared at the young mechanic, and asked what in the name of all sanity this thing was. Brach admitted the truth. He expected fury. Instead, Reinhardt rested a hand on his shoulder and said softly, "You saved all 5 of us today." Then he added, "You will do this to every Tiger we have." But the moment lasted only hours. A technical inspector arrived before sunset. He studied the patch, measured it, photographed it, made notes in a little book that seemed thicker with rules than with understanding. By the time he finished, he did not see a miracle of survival. He saw a violation, an offense against procedure, a breach of uniformity, the kind of thing bureaucrats feared far more than dead soldiers. He did not order a commendation. He ordered the patch removed immediately and instructed Brach to present himself to headquarters for possible disciplinary action. The crew protested. Reinhardt argued so fiercely he nearly lost his rank. But orders were orders, and the inspector was deaf to reason. Brach removed the plate with shaking hands, the metal still warm with the memory of battle. He expected punishment, perhaps imprisonment. Instead, headquarters issued him a formal warning. No more unauthorized modifications under any circumstances. He returned to his tools, silent, hollow, and certain he would never again be allowed to save a life the way he had that day. The war rolled on. 224 was eventually destroyed months later, not from the turret ring, but from a mine that flipped the Tiger onto its side. Only 2 of the crew survived that day, Reinhardt and Stoss. Both swore that the reason they survived as long as they had was not the Tiger's engineering, not the doctrine, not the superior gun, but a young mechanic who believed that saving men mattered more than following rules. After the war ended, historians argued for decades about the rumored invincible Tiger that survived 17 direct hits in a single engagement. Some dismissed it as myth. Others claimed it was impossible due to known armor tolerances. The German archives contained no mention of the patch, no record of Brach's weld, no note of the miracle. Bureaucracy had erased the evidence of unauthorized genius. But nearly half a century later, an amateur historian exploring old battlefields near Kharkov stumbled upon a twisted crescent of steel buried in thawing mud. Testing revealed it came from a Tiger tank, but its shape did not match any known component. Further study found faint weld lines, hammer marks, and the unmistakable curvature of a plate shaped by human hands rather than factory presses. When elderly veterans from the region were shown photographs of the discovery, two of them recognized it instantly. One whispered, "That is the ring shield." The other said, "That metal saved lives." In his old age, Emil Brach was tracked down by researchers. He lived quietly in a small village, working as a tractor mechanic. A life too humble for a man whose creation had saved so many. When asked about the plate, he shrugged and said it was nothing special, just something that needed to be done. Asked why he risked punishment to do it, he answered with the simple honesty of a man who had lived too close to death. Regulations do not bury the dead. People do. The weld he made in secret, under dim lantern light, bending stolen steel with bleeding hands, was never officially recognized. No medal bore his name. No monument spoke of his patch. Yet for one fierce, snowy afternoon on the Eastern Front, that illegal armor plate defied 17 direct hits, defeated mathematics, silenced Soviet guns, and kept 5 young men alive when every rule said they should have been dead. This is how innovation often truly happens in war. Not in boardrooms or laboratories, not in memoranda or official channels. It happens in sleepless nights, in whispered defiance, in the hands of mechanics who see problems no one else sees and refuse to wait for permission to solve them. It happens in courage that has no insignia and no parade, courage that welds steel in silence. It happens, sometimes, in a single illegal patch that should not have existed, and yet saved the lives of men who very much should have. And that is the real story behind the tiger that refused to die.